Hey, I'm Michael, and this is Michael in the Middle. It's an intergenerational relational podcast for people who are interested in better human interaction. I'm glad you're here. I think if you really get down to the heart of the matter, how do we, in this current society with 24-hour news cycles available on cable news and in digital and print media and especially with social media, how do we ever get to a point of mutual respect that allows us, even when we disagree, to truly care and love for one another? I think we've gotten to a point in society where we almost feel this pressure that if you don't believe exactly the way I do, maybe I shouldn't really spend too much time with you. I mean, I think, I don't know that we give voice to that truth that much, but I sure see that, you know. I hear people, say on social media, if you got people that are bugging you, just block them. Well, I think Diamond Rio's right. Love don't get nowhere walking away, I think you got to figure out a way. I guess when you talk about the seeds for it, I'm just naive enough. I'm just crazy enough. I believe in the power of God enough that maybe we can do better here. And so that's what I'm trying to do. Michael in the Middle is about being in the middle of relationships, standing in the gap, being bridge builders on a relational basis, but it's also about talking to people who are right in the middle of doing something about things that need our attention in these days.
There's a lot of sadness and brokenness in this world, and who am I to think that I can make any real difference in that? But I want people, when they listen to this, to aspire to relationships with one or several people that give life, that bring joy, and that elevate the notion that things can be better than they are. And you've always kind of been that for me,
and
man.
also, Michael, because you're going to need that one day. You better get those kind of friends now, because you're going to need them one day. I've needed you, and I've called you when I needed you, and you've been there. There's several things that form identity in us, but in our young people, they need a place to belong.
I want to be the kind of person that anybody could feel safe saying anything to me, and I wouldn't overreact. I wouldn't immediately, make some sort of snap judgment that would hinder the possibility of some kind of relationship. I have to admit that God has not always granted my wishes, but God has always been my ultimate source of hope. And many times, God has shown up to offer hope in the form of another human being. I want to live my life in ways that become channels of hope for people who wonder if things will ever be better. And I do believe this with all my heart, that God will use us to help someone else whenever and wherever our ability to do so meets our willingness to do so. That's at the heart of redemption. Redemption offers hope. Be a hope floater. Be a redemption giver and conduit. I believe you can do that. I believe we can all do that. And I believe we can make a difference in this world as we open ourselves up to the idea that maybe, just maybe, someone else's life can be improved by the way that we live ours. I know that sounds kind of like a broken record, but if you're going to be listening to this podcast, you're going to be hearing some similar themes. That's what Michael in the Middle is really all about, trying to be in the middle of making life better for someone else. So, you have been on this earth for how many years?
According to the records, February the 26th was my 85th birthday.
85.
I tell people that I'm older than I've ever been, but not as old as I want to be. I'm working on that.
That's great.
I was born in the Samaritan Hospital in Nampa, Idaho, which is a building that still stands today on the campus of Northwest Nazarene University. And my birth took place there because, well, that's where my mother was. And my daddy was not far away. Now, my earliest gainful employment was starting a business of grass mowing. And so I started with the old reel type. I have a picture that was taken of me by a newspaper reporter who was driving around town looking for human interest stories. And he saw me on the sidewalk. And I had arranged what you might call the first stage of a riding mower. I had a wagon that I tied to the mower, and had a camping stool that I sat on, and on the sidewalk, I'd get the engine revved up, and I'd go driving down the sidewalk.
My word.
And so I don't know where that article is today, but that was a special memory.
I definitely want to know how you met my mother. You know, that's important to me. I don't even know that I've ever really heard you say the first time you saw the woman who ultimately you would marry. And
she was doing something that she didn't enjoy. She was working in the kitchen in the dining hall back in the days when we served family style at college. And my college roommate, Ron Buddy Emmert, who lives today in Orange, Texas, was working back there. And he said, I want you to meet this girl back here. So he introduced me to Janelle. And it was not immediate romance. There was a little interlude of about 12 to 18 months there until I saw the light. But that freshman year was unique. She had quite a few. She had quite a few
suitors. Gentlemen callers.
Yeah, in fact, I used to say that getting Janelle was like going to Baskin Robbins. I had to take a number, and she was much sought after. And I actually dated a young lady that was a very fine young lady, and she was from Kansas City.
Okay.
And we dated quite a bit that first freshman year.
Yeah.
In fact, a little interesting note, at the freshman banquet, where I just happened to be serving as freshman class president, I
just happened.
Yeah. I took the young lady named Olitha, later known as Lee. Gary Hartpence, who later became Gary Hart, took Janelle at the freshman banquet. And the governor of the state of Oklahoma, Raymond Gary, was the speaker. So that was a kind of an interesting turn of events for times changed.
Well, yeah, you gotta finish that story off a little bit, because Gary Hartpence, who later changed his name to Hart, if you're a student of political history at all, that's Senator Gary Hart from Colorado. There's a lot more to that story, but if I remember correctly, Gary and Lee ended up getting married, and you and Janelle Crawford ended up getting married, and you know, I mean, it's no secret which way you guys probably leaned politically across the years, but I happen to know, and I think it's really a wonderful story, and it fits right along with some of the things that I'm trying to talk about with this podcast. Even though you and Gary had wildly different views perhaps on certain things, you maintained, and to this day
we had
a very warm
a
relationship.
very good friendship. We played tennis together. He traveled with me. He went to my home. Gary was a very gifted guy. Gary is a gifted man, and has been very successful in his own right. He and I share, in one respect, a common grief. About 2 years ago, his wife, Lee, passed away, and perhaps the greatest loss in my life humanly is your mother, who passed away this past November. Yeah, Gary, in fact, went off to Yale and became involved in politics and did very well. And had some unfortunate things happen that maybe kept him from going further than he would have, for he really was on a fast track. There's a little interesting note, and I believe it's I'm not sure exactly the date. National Enquirer.
I remember this.
Where Gary and I had been in a political race in college for student body president, and it just so happened that I won that particular election. And when they found out about it, I was interviewed by National Enquirer, and lo and behold, it came out in the National Enquirer headline. His picture on one side, my picture on the other, and it said, "The man who beat Hart for president." When his wife passed away, I made contact with him and expressed my sympathies. A lot of good memories. College years were great. Going to Mississippi, having lived in a culture like Nazarene culture in the Bethany, Oklahoma City area, for one thing, and totally dominated, not like Mississippi, which was 45% black Americans in Mississippi. So the first time I met Charles Johnson was in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And we made it to Shoney's restaurant. And the different pastors were there from on that district, from on that zone. And I felt kind of a cold reception. For one thing, Charles Johnson didn't know me, and I really didn't know him. And it was not necessarily a warm and cozy time. We went into the service, and the service got along very well. We had good music, and about halfway through the message, I do not know to this day what I was preaching about, but something happened to Charles Johnson, and he came alive. And when he came alive, his people came alive. And I've joked about it that from then on, I preached things I never even thought of, because it just, we went to the reception and had a little punch and cookies back there. And Charles Johnson came to me. He's 1 year younger than I. He came to me and he said, we both have the same name. I believe we check our family tree. We might be cousins. And I put my arm around him and I said, not cousins, brothers. From that day until the day he passed, I was 38, he was 37. We were brothers. And it revolutionized the relationship of Meridian, Mississippi, and the Nazarenes in Mississippi, and Charles became a leader on the district.
I've thought about this a lot over the course of my life, and I even talked a little bit about the move to Mississippi in my first episode, where I was telling a little bit of my story. But I don't ever remember you saying, I got to do something about this situation. I got to do something to create a different environment. Again, it was just out of the context of a relationship with another human being, and I think that's what resonated most with Charles and Shirley. It wasn't that you were trying to do something just to curry favor or to win them over. It was a genuine heart of love. And
if there's anything I could say to people in this climate even today, the way we get along with each other is not to see each other for what is external, but to realize that we're all created in the image of God. Charles used to sing, "He made me in his image. He made me just like him." I remember that so well, and I loved watching you guys interact across the
I loved going to Meridian to be there and participate and preach. Charles and Shirley, marvelous people. She referred to Janelle as her sister, and I referred to him as my brother. And love finds a way, and it worked in that case.
I've done grief groups for 20 years, not the traditional therapy model. I do storytelling groups, and we meet around an unfinished Amish quilt. And I tell people we're going to quilt stories, 90 minutes each week for 6 weeks. And that you know something that somebody in the circle needs to know. And it's been interesting, Michael. One person accused me of running a VBS for griefers, because we do lots of arts and crafts, because some people, they need a way to put with their experience. For example, one thing we do is get these terracotta flower pots and break them, and then they have to put it back together.
Yeah.
And we sit around a room gluing these pots back together, but it's unbelievable how people talk. One thing I borrowed from scholars at Auburn, they used to give a heart or a circle, and the first night you had to divvy that up into what percentage each emotion felt, where it was anger, disappointment, shock. And I always said, now, it's the emotion you actually feel tonight, not what you're supposed to feel. And they use different color crayons to divvy that heart or a pie, a circle. And then they come back to the group and they explain their heart, the colors of their heart. And then they date it. And the last night they do it again. Go back and look at the heart. Wow, you were pretty angry when we started this process, but you only have like 5% anger now. How has that happened? And these are strangers by and large. And yet they build this bond. Somebody listen to me, no crosstalk, say, you know what you are, let me tell you, here's what you need to do. None of that, just simply listen to my story. And some people told things, when they parked in the hospital parking lot, they had no idea what they were really going to say. But there was that moment where it was like the intersection. This is my time. And watching people go, keep talking. Yeah, come on, keep talking. And it was incredible. I told them, I wish I could have videotaped them the first night when they came into the room, and then showed them the last night. The countenances sometimes had changed, because that became what the Jewish people call Mekom Hanakama, which means safe place of comfort. And I think whatever the loss is, or the anticipated loss, because there's anticipatory grief. Sometimes that begins when the doctor walks in that cubicle and you look at his face and go, this isn't going to be good. It's that sense of it's safe. This is a safe place for me to say whatever I want to say. And that's what people and I think some people, I'm sorry for my counseling friends, but they're willing to rent your ears for 50 minutes because no one else in their life is listening.
Yeah.
Or, Michael, I've discovered some people, if you start talking about you're angry at God, now, God has his way. We're not, no. And so they can't tell you why they're angry at God. And they need to be able to express that. And I go, well, Job, 3,000 years ago, dealt with that same issue. It's not new.
Yeah.
Giving people that they know. And that could be two people sitting in Starbucks, back in the corner of Starbucks, even with all the noise around them. That has become Mekom Hanakama, a safe place. they can grieve or talk or reminisce, whatever it may be. But we all need those safe places.
I totally agree.
I think that generosity it begins with the fine art of noticing. I think it begins with just noticing. And my brother Stan was exceptional at that. He had I think a spirit infused sense of who needed something and how he might be placed in that moment to do something for them, just a little bit to encourage them. And so at his memorial service, there was a large one, and then we had a family memorial service. But at the family service, I said, I have one word for my brother. He was a champion. And so at this stage of what I call my advanced adolescence, I think that's really what I want to be for the people in that God puts in my life. I want to be a champion. I want to be a champion for them. And it may be giving something tangible, resources or whatever, but it may just be just a word of encouragement that is just what they need.
What are your hopes and dreams for the church? What are the hopes and dreams that you may have even for your own kids as the future begins to unfold? Given all that you've experienced in these recent years in particular, but even all the way back to that day when that man said, you'll make a good pastor's wife. I mean, you're here now. What do you want to see out there in the future?
Michael, I'm actually so deeply hopeful right now. And I think partly like this metaphor has helped me see the hope in what God is doing in the world. I hear a lot of people kind of describe the situation that they were in as, oh, what are we going to do? Woe is us. The world is so, and there's so much division. There's strife and conflict in some deep ways. But I am incredibly hopeful. And I think partly of being able to see some of these dark moments that I've walked through personally, some of the dark moments that the church has walked through, and some of the dark moments that our world has walked through. Yeah. COVID pandemic, racial unrest. I mean, so many different things over these last few years. To see it not as walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but perhaps that darkness is like the lightless cradle of the womb, where God is birthing something new through pain, right? Mm-hmm. And so even just that metaphor has helped me to be incredibly hopeful. Getting to be on a college campus and work with students in Generation Z. I am not an expert on Generation Z, but these students are awesome. And they are different, and they're curious, and they're creative, and they're teaching me so much. And I learned that the more I am open to learn from them, the more hopeful I become about them. And the more closed off I am to learn from them, the more afraid I become of them, right? And so as I have done what you're doing, really like learn their stories and sat down at coffee and asked, like, tell me, how'd you get here? And why Trevecca and why this major? Like, the more I've heard those stories, the more hopeful I've become for this next generation and what God is up to in the church.
Sooner or later, I'm going to speak to somebody for the last time. So that's kind of on my mind. That is best, can still be incredibly difficult. I've been really blessed. I've got no complaints at all. I truly feel like God's been better to me than I could have ever deserved, as cliche as that sounds. But I want my life, my words, my actions to be an encouragement to those around me. And when that last time comes, I pray that whatever I've said to them will be a blessing and not a curse. I think one of the things that probably is motivating me as much as anything these days to do this podcast, to try to write a blog every now and then, to speak speak a good word if I have an opportunity in front of a crowd somewhere, or just if it's over lunch with a couple of people. I want to be as generous and encouraging as I possibly can in those moments. We get so busy trying to change the world. I mean, you went to Kenya and you're thinking, what can I do for these people over here? And God's preparing you to do something for people just literally a couple of miles away from where you were living at the time. And that brings me to the idea of home, the vagabond experience that, particularly women are facing when they're being trafficked, and the way they get moved around, and they never feel like they have a place that they can call home. And then you get the opportunity. Was this the let me make sure I get this up right here. Was this the first home you were given? Is Marion's house, is that the first?
Yeah, Marion was the kind of woman who, she said everybody needs a place, just what you said. She said everybody needs a place and everybody needs a home. They told me, when you started talking to us about what it was you might want the property for, it was our first sign of hope. They just said, when we walked off this property that day, God will redeem it. We don't know how. God will redeem this land, this property.
What just is crystal clear is that a lot of the things that we're facing now are things that humanity has faced for time immemorial. All the way along, people have had trouble getting along with each other. And I guess, people think of solutions for problems from one, perspective. And these people are over here on this side thinking of, how they're going to solve these different problems. And very rarely do we meet in the middle. And I'm not trying to overplay this. Somehow, some way, if solutions are going to be found, there might need to be some sense of spirit of cooperation in the process. I think if you're truly generous, if you're truly thinking about giving freely and abundantly to others, you can't do so for any purpose other than making something better for someone else. And what I know is that when you make something better for someone else, I believe your life becomes better in the process. I think that's how the world gets better. I guess Jimmy Fallon really likes your son's comedy.
Conan gave Nathan his first shot.
Awesome.
And because Nathan is a storyteller, he's not a joke teller.
Yeah.
I got very blessed. Nathan, they did a video, little movie. I don't know where it got shown at, but it was it was a couple of days me on tour with Nathan. So they're filming, making this kind of behind the scenes film. And I had really no idea that it was being filmed at this time, because those guys, they were around you all the time. You never knew where they were going. But some lady asked me, she said, "You must be very proud of your son." And on tape, I go, "I'm proud of all my children."
Yeah.
And I went out of the die, and that was it. I don't even really remember, but my son and daughter saw that, and it really got to them, both of them. They both said, "You don't know how much that does." And I thought, well, why would you not know that?
Yeah.
But you just got to go, well, of course. And I think one of the best things Nathan's done is he's hired a sister, and she will put him straight faster than anybody. She lets him know, "Your name, Bargatze. I grew up with you, and you used to put your dirty socks in my face and all this stuff. I know you." And so she keeps him where he needs to be, and I think that's a great thing.
It's awesome.
Michael in the Middle is all about learning how to talk to each other and listen to each other's stories. And love to hear yours sometime. Maybe we can do that over a cup of iced tea or coffee somewhere, or maybe it'll be as a result of this podcast.